there's a lot of places inside the Microsoft ecosystem where you see news. Like you might say a new tab in a browser and you get news right there.
The Microsoft News app on your desktop or mobile phone.
I use the Android launcher on my phone. It shows a feed of news, and MSN.com. There's another news feed. It would just make sense if all of the news came from a central source.
Yes, it would.
Yeah, turns out all of this has been thought through way before we thought about it. We've got the team to talk about it and what their new developer story is on this episode of DevRadio. Hi, and welcome to the next episode of Microsoft Dev Radio. I'm Jerry. Here's Darren.
Hey.
And we have Scott and Hillary, both on the Microsoft News team. Guys, introduce yourself.
Yeah. So my name is Scott Krieder, and I'm a program manager on the News API team.
And I'm Hillary Mutisya. I'm an engineering lead responsible for the Microsoft News API.
Cool.
So how long have you guys been working with Microsoft?
I've been at Microsoft for 12 years now.
Wow.
Yeah, moved around the company a bit, started in Office, then worked in Windows, and now working on the online services.
Yep. Cool. And I've been with the company about 5 years now.
Cool. Congratulations.
Thank you.
5 years, you get I love saying it, but that's when you get your thing. It's cool.
Get your crystal.
Yes.
Yes.
You can break your foot if you drop it on it. It's pretty serious.
Yeah, they look heavy.
Yeah.
Okay, so you guys are part of the Microsoft News team, but there's a lot of components to the Microsoft News team, and there's a developer story here that maybe a lot of developers don't know about. Let's start with how we all know what Microsoft News is. It's the app, Microsoft News, where we all go to get our customized information. Talk to me about a little bit about the app and what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. So you may have seen on Windows 10, the Microsoft News app. That same app is also on iOS and Android. And we also power the Edge default homepage and new tab page experience, as well as some plugins for additional browsers as well. And so the Microsoft News API, which we're excited to talk to you about today, powers all of those different experiences where your users may have seen Microsoft News previously.
And in terms of developer story, the News app is actually a Xamarin application, so we're able to share the code across the various.
We did not know it was a Xamarin app.
It is a Xamarin app, so that might be something that we dig into at a later session.
Yeah.
Okay, one question I did have is I thought in the early versions of Microsoft News that it referred to MSN. So what's the relationship between MSN and Microsoft News?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the News API powers all of these different experiences, including MSN.com. So MSN.com has historically been the default landing page for Internet Explorer, and over the years we partnered closely with the browser teams to maintain that news presence within the browser, so that users can stay up to date and in the know about all the news that's happening. So MSN.com is kind of our roots. That's where we started, and now our service is powering lots of different news experiences throughout the company.
Now, how big is the Microsoft News? Is it? Of course, we're in the United States, but it's not U.S. only.
Yeah, absolutely, you're right. So we partner with over 4,500 media brands around the globe. So we have 500 million users in 140 countries and over 28 different languages. So we really do have a global footprint.
Oh yeah, it's giant, all right, and a lot of different sources as well. Let's see, it wasn't that long ago when Google got in a lot of trouble because their algorithm was doing something funny. We have a lot of algorithms and AI in our news curation, but is it just machines?
No, we have found that machine learning, while very effective, it needs some extra training information from editors. So in the case of Microsoft News, we actually have 800 editors worldwide in 50 different locations. They are on the ground. They understand what trends matter, what elections are going on in each country. And so they receive this content that we're ingesting from various distribution partners, and then they curate the feeds for us. And we use the human curation as input to our machine learning approach. So we are kind of blending the best of both worlds.
Okay, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, that human touch, I think, is also very useful in understanding certainly the empathy aspect of sometimes of news, that something that may not necessarily fire on an algorithm for broad interest actually fires because of empathy.
Yeah, that's right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Now, I know you guys personalize based on my own individual choices. You guys personalize based on my location. I know that as well. But like Darren here, he's very interested in news from England. Can he pull in other countries' news even though he lives in the United States?
But yes, we do support that, and that's part of the power of the fact that all these are really just variants of the same root experience. It's the same API. So in the news app in particular, you can actually just go in and change your location. We allow this in the edge experiences as well. So the default homepage or the default tab page, you can set particular location as your source.
Absolutely, yeah. User choice is one of our major principles on the news team, and so we're adding more and more features for personalization and customization so that we get the content that you want to see straight to you.
And is it always tied to the MSA, or how do you remember my personalization?
Yes, that's a good question. So if you're signed in with an MSA, a Microsoft account, that is kind of the happy path. We know a lot about that user in that case. We do support users without signed-in experience. In some cases, it's not as good in that case because we can't roam across devices and things like that. But we do kind of do our best to help personalize that experience.
All right, let's back up just for a second and talk about the application. First of all, I just want to react again to the fact that it's Xamarin. I had no idea that it's so awesome. And it's not Xamarin Forms because it's way too customized, right?
Yep.
Yeah, way too customized. All right, that's all I want to talk about now, but I'm going to not talk about that part. I want to talk about the API. All right, so we know that the API that you guys have today, you built it really because internally you have many consumers like we went through, right? You have the app itself, and you have MSN, you have the Android launchers, a consumer of yours as well, I think.
Yes.
And a lot of different places where you want to serve out. We want to be consistent as well as have that consistent personal experience. Now we're wanting to offer this out publicly as the Microsoft News API for developers outside. So talk to me first, who do you anticipate being your main consumers?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we've already started partnering with some third-party companies. So if you have an Amazon Fire TV at home, you could boot up the Silk browser, and you can actually see the news content there. So there's some companies that Microsoft is partnering with, but also just developers that want to enhance their application. And I use the word app pretty loosely. It could be a web app or a phone app or something like that. If they want to add news content to that experience and help kind of enhance that app, that would be a great use case for Microsoft News, because we can provide really great content in many different categories to that application developer.
So that was the key thing I was thinking about. So say I'm producing an application on motorcycling, for example. Can I get a very tight filtered experience of the stream of information that's coming to me, so it's all within context?
Yes. So the News API has this notion of an interest graph. So we have about 40,000 topics that
could you
name them?
Yeah, could you list them all?
How long do you have?
They're both instantly that mean.
Sorry, keep going.
But so we have 40,000 topics that we ingest content for, and every incoming piece of content gets tagged with a list of them, so we know a particular content may apply to multiple categories. But so this allows us to get really granular. So for example, when the royal baby is born and that becomes a common query that we are seeing from users, that gets promoted to an interest, and so you can query the feed API and ask for something related to just that particular interest.
And so that kind of speaks to the ecosystem there. You talked about a query there. So is that necessarily through the sort of the Microsoft News interface, or is that someone searching on Bing, for example? Do you have access to those types of search criteria to help drive interest in the news feed?
Yes, we actually do have. We are in the same organization as the Bing search engine, and so we have access to, especially for users, we can look at Bing history as well as history interacting with our apps directly, and we also can look at general trends. So we may know whether it's a particular user's interest in an area or whether it's a general trend happening across.
That's very cool. So say again, I'm building my motorcycle application here. How do I engage with the API? What's the model? What's the pricing model? What sort of tiers of subscriptions are there? Those sorts of things.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So we've got a pretty easy form that you can fill out. It's just 4 questions, just name, email, kind of how you want to use it. And then a member of our team will reach out and help you get an API key and kind of up and running. The model's pretty simple. The API is free. We do monetize on our side through ads on the pages, on the news articles that are rendered. So we don't expose the whole body of the article. Just due to some of our licensing, we have to render that on our.
So we've got to click through.
Yes.
And does it load in my application, or does it load in a browser?
It loads in a browser, but if you had a web view in your application, that would work as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now let's talk about monetization for a second, because I think this is important to talk about. So, of course, there's revenue involved, but at the same time, Microsoft News has had a pretty significant impact on just journalism on a whole. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Absolutely, yeah. We are really excited and proud. We've paid back $750 million over the last several years back to independent journalism, and we're really proud to be a huge sponsor and contributor to journalism. We think it's really important to have a free press, to have trusted journalism that's available to all of our users around the globe.
I think that's a pretty cool story as well, right? Because you hear about monetization, you're like, oh, great, making a millionaire times 2. But no, it's a little bit different than that, right? Because you can actually make a difference as well. Talk to me a little bit also about if I want to become a contributor, what's the route there?
If you want to be a contributor
is there a crowdsourcing model? I think is really.
I see.
Yeah, I'm a writer. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a good question, and we talk a lot about user-generated content today. We don't have anything right now ready to go, but it's something that that comes up often. It comes up on how we can hook into that model more. Yeah, so we don't have a great answer right now, but
no, it's okay. It's very similar to the people who at least reach out to me asking how they can become a photographer for the Bing homepage. They're like, hey, we have something. I'm like, there's a process. I just don't know what it is, but it's very appealing because these are real platforms that are big in scope and really available. I mean, it's nice.
Yeah, but the flip side of it is one of trust, isn't it? If you're leveraging authentic news generation agencies and so on and so forth, there's certainly an implicit level of trust there, and there's also the idea that Microsoft is doing the due diligence to vet those sources as part of the aggregation activity and surfacing it up on the channel. Whereas if you move to a crowdsourcing model, it's hard to understand sometimes what the motivation is for those individual contributors that are writing that news.
And Darren's motorcycle application is going to show motorcycle news. How can he trust Microsoft News and the articles that you're going to display?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess there's 2 things that you mentioned. The first is we're very careful with the publishing partners that we do partner with, and so we have a very high bar for who we partner with. So that's the first step. And the second step is that we ingest all of the content into our content management system, and there are a lot of checks that content has to go through. It has to make sure there's no profanity in the title. There's some image detection that we do to make sure the image is safe for children, because our news content could be on the Edge browser, and that could be used in schools and for children. And so there's multiple checks, and we don't really have a slider scale of how safe or applicable the content is, it's pretty binary. It meets our bar or it doesn't, and that's the other place our editors come in, is they can go in and manually say, oh, maybe this title needs to be updated or remove or edit something, and that can help like approve and get some content into the system.
Yeah, and the editors also help us gauge credibility, because since we're not necessarily experts in all the languages or all the domains that content may come in, they may flag something as looking suspicious. Maybe it claims something happened that could not possibly have happened in that scenario. So that's where the human connection again comes into play.
Yeah. So you have curators not just in the United States then?
Yes, we have them in 50 locations across the globe. And even in those locations, they operate as hubs. So we may have like one editorial team serving multiple countries, but like actually looking at content coming.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
If I decide to use the REST API, talk to me about the developer experience. It's a REST API, and talk to me a little bit about authentication too.
Are there any SDKs that support it, or is it just pure REST endpoint as an example?
So yes, that's a great point. So we have the documentation for our news API is actually in Swagger. It's on apidocs.msn.com.
Okay.
And so from here, we go over how you can authenticate. You need an API key, and there's the process for getting one issued for you. Once you get access to the API, you can just directly generate a client from the Swagger page. And that will issue all the REST calls and get back the schemas in the right format.
Are there requirements on my side then how I present that data?
Yes, yeah, there are. So we do require that we give some attribution to like powered by Microsoft News, and really that's due to our branding. We want to make sure that users are aware that Microsoft News is powering this experience, and due to some of the licensing on what content we expose. So I mentioned a little earlier that we don't expose the entire body of the article. For instance, that is on MSN, but we do give you like the title and a short abstract and the picture and some other metadata about that particular piece of content. And there are some requirements about how you can use the content. So for instance, you can't use it in any like near other illicit content. And there are some requirements around like putting ads near the content. So you can't have like a single piece of content followed by a dozen ads or something like that. We do try to make
11 ads are fine.
Yeah, 12 is the problem.
Yeah, we only like to see a single ad per kind of viewport for the user.
Yeah, so do I as the user. I mean, frankly, that's for sure.
Yeah.
In addition, we also do have attribution for the content publisher.
Okay.
So if content came in from New York Times, then we will return the logo and brand information so that carries with the experience.
Am I receiving back a JSON block that I have to format myself, or am I receiving back an iframe, or like what's the implementation?
So right now the contract will give you back a JSON block. We actually support OData, so you can use $select to filter further the set of fields that you actually need.
Wow.
In addition, we, from our engagement with developers, we are noticing certain common integration patterns, and so we are working on having some sample projects that would at least help you get bootstrapped if you're working in any of the common frameworks.
Now, if back to Darren's motorcycle application that he's writing, he has worked pretty hard on this to make sure that the age rating is pretty low. Now, interacting with the news API, now I have content that comes from news that you guys curate for us, as well as advertising as well. What does that do to the age rating of his application?
That's a very good question. So we have a kids version of MSN.com, which is there's not any ML or AI running on that page, and that is like 100% curated. Today with the API, we don't quite have like a way to return just that kids content. So I think whatever age rating you have when you have like the internet connection, I think you'd have to apply that rating in this case as well.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, me too. I think a lot of developers are often taken off guard when they introduce advertising that it impacts their age rating of their application.
Yeah.
And not just in Microsoft News, but all advertising will do that, because then there's a kind of a mystery of things.
Yes.
But at the same time, no doubt your advertising too is curated.
Yes. Yeah. So we monetize through advertising. We're very careful with the ad partners that we support. And the other thing that we do on all of our sites is we clearly mark anything that is sponsored content with a logo that says ad. So we want to be transparent to our users when they're seeing an ad versus when they're seeing a piece of content. Yeah, so that's really important to us as well.
So you were talking about kind of some constraints about the consumption of the feed and so on and so forth. So if somebody else turned around and said, I'm just going to create a general purpose news application and I'm solely going to leverage your API and I'm going to put it up as Darren's News.
Yeah, not Microsoft News, it's Darren's News.
Is that compliant, or is that something that you would turn
powered
around
by
and say,
Microsoft News?
No, that's clearly just a lift and shift of our feed. It's not serving any particular purpose, and that would
that's
satisfy.
That's interesting.
Yeah, in that case, I think that's totally fine. If people, like, we built the Microsoft News app, and we're really proud of that experience. As long as you give the attribution that says powered by Microsoft News, like, we believe kind of in a free ecosystem, and if you can drive more users to that, that's great. Yeah.
Well, the reality is you're not a loser from that, because every time they click on a news article, you're a winner from that. I mean, it's beautiful all the way around.
Yeah, but there's other ecosystems, such as the fruit-based ecosystem, that doesn't allow a direct competitor to one of the applications that's delivered on board. So that's why I asked that question.
Sweet. We win again. Cool. All right, talk to me a little bit about the technology side of the API. And is there an SLA or something I need to know for my application?
Yes, so the News API, since we do need to serve our internal partners as well, we are a 3 nines SLA for partners. And, I'm not sure what else.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Are there any restrictions on me on how frequently I can call and pull down feeds and so on and so forth? Imagine my app is incredibly successful. I have hundreds of thousands of people. I dream.
And that he's a terrible developer and he has the call in a loop.
And every time somebody scrolls or whatever, it's pulling down more content. Are there restrictions on that?
Got it. Yeah, we do have some throttling. If you hit the API too much, I think it's around like 100 QPS.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we do have throttling, and we have some like DDoS mitigation just in case somebody writes a bot that is just flooding our system.
Terrible. Yeah.
But in most cases, when we have worked with distribution with partners and noticed the traffic patterns being high, we will reach out and try to figure out whether it's a legitimate case or whether it's something that they need to fix as a bug on their end.
Okay.
So we'll try to reach out before we
before you turn us off.
Yes.
Before you turn him off.
Exactly.
Now, the personalization I get with my MSA, is that through the REST API as well?
Yes, absolutely. The feed API allows you to pass in user context, and
okay, cool.
This could be the MSA context, or you could pass in just a generic user identifier. As long as it's a stable identifier, it can be used for personalization across multiple calls.
I could use a local custom personal token that I'm creating for my application.
Yep.
Well, that's cool.
So
there are some requirements there, though. We want to make sure that the user can clear that token, and we do respect like all the GDPR requirements there. So we want to make sure that users can be forgotten in that case. So, yep.
Okay.
GDPR sure complicated some things.
Yes.
There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, probably for the better, but
yes.
That's fair. That's fair. That's fair. Cool. If a developer is interested in this, then they're going to go to tell me again where a developer goes to get more information.
Yeah, just head to aka.ms/news API survey. And again, it's just 4 quick questions: name, email, how you kind of envision using the News API. and then we'll reach out and get in touch and get you up and running.
And that may sound intimidating to a developer to fill in if they can justify getting access to the service, but you guys want developers to use this API as well.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. And really, by telling us like how you kind of envision yourself using it, we can share some examples, and we can just make it a little easier to get started with the API for your scenarios.
Do you have any sort of target platforms in mind, such as desktop, mobile, web, or anything along those lines, or is it just wherever you want to put the content?
Yeah, wherever. We're really excited to see how developers are going to take this API and kind of run with it.
Yeah, our first set of distribution partners use it on everything from web to the launcher experiences. So they have like custom launchers that are powered by our news experience. There's TV experiences, so on device. Basically, it's wherever you have customers or people that need to be in the know, which is pretty much everywhere.
Yeah, that's right. And you can have a consistent experience across all of them because you can keep your context.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool. Guys, this is pretty neat. Developers can go to AKAMS/Microsoft News-survey. I get that right?
No, was there a dash in there for the survey, or was it no survey?
Just News API survey. All
News API survey. Got it. I didn't. Yeah, there you go. Cool. And now you can have the same experience the rich, robust experience they have inside the Microsoft News application. You can put inside your own. Pretty freaking sweet. Guys, thanks for being on the show today and talking to us about this.
Yeah. Thank you for having us.
Yeah.